his reaction to this call for demonstration, he had to write a letter, or you people had to write a letter to Professor Kamto. Can we have a pre-knowledge of what happened before that letter came in?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mwambu. A point of correction, I would like you, whenever you're talking, ECOSOC as a person has different opinion as a politician and the party, though he represents the party. And there are times you make statements that are ECOSOC, and there are times you make statements that is USDP. So when we are talking about the letter, I always like you to refer it as USDP. He makes that statement on behalf of USDP. That document was signed on behalf of USDP. Yeah, we want to say Professor Maurice Kamto, a very vibrant politician for the 21st century that we've seen. Somebody who has touched the Cameroon political landscape and is pushing his agenda. And in a nutshell, he's struggling to rally other political parties to see that they can have a common united front towards the regime in power. I want to say it is in that note that the Renaissance Party extended the hand of fellowship that we should look into their agenda about what they have to carry in respect to the Anglophone Crisis, the electoral code. So our letter was in response to the letter that was sent to us by CRM to talk about our positioning, to talk about their ongoing activities in boycotting and distorting the election, the regional election that is going to, that has been convened by the president, which we send a response to them humbly as a representative and a respectable political party.
But the later, some analysts get so confused that it wasn't clear, but I believe it was so clear. It's like you people are not in line with Professor Kamto.
If you say we are not in line, I want to differ. And if you say we are in line, I also want to differ. One thing I want to tell you is that every political party has a vision and that a philosophy. If you look our line of writing, we appreciate the CRM under the leadership of Professor Maurice Kamto to send a hand to us, to share their worries, and they saw us as competent partners who can mount the stage with them to carry out actions that they believe could touch the both political parties. We gave our response to it, which is very clear. We appreciate, we acknowledge the fact that Cameroon has been under a degree of dictatorship. We acknowledge that Cameroon needs reformation. We acknowledge that humans are stronger than institutions in Cameroon. We acknowledge that for the Anglophone crisis to come to an end, there are things that ought to be done by the government and even non-governmental actors. So after appreciating all this, we thank him that where our interests will intersect, we will have to march along. But at the moment, we still have a lot to keep our house in order before we are taking an open stand. For example, our press conference will be coming and we'll make an open stand. That's when we'll have a press release. It's quite unfortunate that the letter we sent to Professor Maurice Kamto somehow, some way filtered out. It should have been a lot of privacy because our stand ought to be made only through a press release and not through a private correspondence back to another political
Okay,
party.
before I get to other panelists, let me just get to the letter so that maybe even our viewers can get an insight of it. United Socialist Democratic Party, and it says, reference USDP 9/2020 0042 NPNEC and so on. Okay, now let me get to what it says. Call for a common resistance front against the Bias regime. A call for a common resistance front against the Bias. It is sent to Professor Maurice Kamto, the national president of the Cameroon Renaissance Movement. He says, Dear Mr. President, on behalf of the United Socialist Democratic Party, USDP, I am writing in response to the letter you sent to the USDP dated the 25th August 2020. We sincerely appreciate consideration you have for our party. This is a proof that you truly consider all Cameroonians in your fight to bring true democracy in our nation. Mr. President, it is not a secret that the USDP and the CRM share much in common regarding the fast deteriorating situation of our country. We believe that the duties that rest upon the shoulder of a political leader is not an easy task. As a political party, we do experience similar situation. We seize this opportunity to congratulate you, the hard work you have been doing in standing up for justice and democracy in our great nation, Cameroon, which has been held in captivity for closely to 4 decades by the current regime. We all know that it is not easy for a citizen to survive tyranny, especially the one we are facing right now. In addition to the precarious socio-economic reality, the outbreak of the Anglophone crisis, which is being fueled by a malicious minority for illicit gains, has brought about untold havoc and misery on the population of the Northwest and Southwest regions. We wish to confirm our commitment to any positive action that will favor a peace resolution to the current crisis, especially through dialogue. In this respect, we will be grateful to liaise with the Cameroon Renaissance Movement, CRM, in efforts towards an all-inclusive dialogue. Okay, now it is signed by Prince Ekoso, the national president of your party. Okay, let me come to you, Mr. Ate Solomon. He is talking of liaising with the Cameroon Renaissance Movement in all its efforts. But now it makes it very difficult for some people to understand, because if they are liaising with the party, it means that they will join the mass demonstration that is supposed to take place 21st, 22nd. What's your take about it?
I don't think Prince Ekoso, in his capacity of the president of the USDP party, has openly said that he is going to join. But from the letter, ideologically speaking, he totally aligns with the fact that there should be an urgent need, or there should be an urgent solution to the Anglophone crisis, especially to political dialogue, which has been very difficult to come with the BR regime. Yeah. And I think it is a move that should be applauded. Now, the question is whether they're going to join in the demonstration or not. Barrister is here beside me, he's shaking his head and saying, no, that doesn't mean so. But just like you point out, the topic is Prince Ekoso's toteism. Because he appears not to be in, and he appears to be in as well. So you can't really tell whether he's in for the demonstration or not. But the question is whether we can successfully have demonstration in Cameroon with the situation that we have now. I think that maybe Prince Ekoso is reading the signs, and he doesn't want to promise people what he will not deliver. Because this is a moment where politicians have become very smart, and they know that their credibility is at stake if they say something and that thing doesn't come to pass. They are very keen and looking at a situation where they will not want to say on the 22nd or the 21st we're going down the streets, and then on that 21st or 22nd they don't go down the streets. It's going to sound as if their credibility, their trustworthiness is at stake. I just want to chip in to say that revolutions are never announced. When I see the CRM party saying that we're going to go down the streets on the 21st, it looks funny to me. I'm sorry to say it, but it looks funny. You don't announce a revolution. A revolution is spontaneous. It just comes up without...
There's a kind of mass, sensitization, which means that he has to make the people be aware.
Yeah, but we just have to let the people know that something is happening, and let the people know that something is happening. But when you program, we're going to have demonstration on the 21st, as if it's a press conference that we're going to go and organize, then there is a problem somewhere. Right? Yeah. You've seen demonstration in other countries. There are spontaneous events. You don't say that we're going to sit and plan.
Means the mobilization should be done on the ground.
Yeah, mobilization should be done. We've seen demonstrations during the Anglophone struggle movement when it was still the Cameroon Anglophone Civil Society Consortium. Yeah. Demonstrations were spontaneous. Mancho BBC appeared from nowhere with a coffin, and people embraced, and then they were moving and doing what they were doing. Nobody woke up and announced that Mancho BBC is going to come to the field with a coffin so that you people should follow him. That's not how demonstrations are done. So if Professor Maurice Kamto might want us to take him more serious, they should surprise us.
Well, but that of Mancho BBC, if you realize the demonstration was already on, so him coming to the street, the coffin was already joining the mass.
That's what I'm saying. That's how revolutions start. You don't go and sit and announce a revolution as if you were announcing a press conference or a party that people should come and meet you to celebrate. No, revolutions come, but people have had enough of it, and then you don't ask them to go to the street.
Okay, maybe when I come back to you, you tell us and our viewers how it should be organized. Let me come to Dr. Busi. If you listen to the letter by Prince Ekoso of the United Democratic Party, what's your take about the form of the paper, the form of the press?
I will look at it from two perspectives. The first perspective is that it's a young politician, which I admire, just the fact that he's young. The second thing is that he said regional elections will be a priority. It's not a priority. Meaning it's not a priority. That's why I said that regional elections are not a priority for now, because there's chaos in the northwest and southwest. But on the other hand, also I look at that party as a party that doesn't have a seat. They don't have councillors, and I don't see the party so strong, because those are parties that you see, the CRM party and the USDP. These are parties that doesn't have seats in the National Assembly. They don't have councillors. Even if they were to partake in the regional elections, I don't see the impact they will create in these regional elections. Mr. Mojoto, permit me say that what he said was good for nation building, for peace building, but to a greater extent. When you look at Professor Maurice Kamto, same thing happened last year, and he was arrested. And we saw how people were arrested. And I feel that you can't be saying that regional elections will not hold, and then you are given a date for a revolution. It doesn't happen anywhere, because the military is already prepared. Psychologically, the military is stationed in all parts of Cameroon. So the fear factor will be one thing that will not enable people to go out there to revolutionize their mind. So I want to look at most of these parties that are against the regional elections. But first, I want to say that at this juncture, when there's no peace in Cameroon, regional elections are not good, because it is devolution of power to the people. And when you look at regional elections, it favors mostly the CPDM, because the CPDM has majority of councillors. I want to ask the USDP, Prince Ekoso's party, do they have a single councillor? Do they have even up to 3 councillors?
Dr. Busi, does that cancel the fact that they can't be elected?
Do they have a college? It depends on the kind of personalities they have in the election. But if you understand our geopolitics is not very democratic. It's democratic to an extent, but our geopolitics and democracy is still growing. I don't see a councillor of CPDM that will boldly cast the vote to a member of the USDP or the CRM party in our young democracy. But if we're in a democracy that is open-minded, that the electoral costs are not biased, we could see personalities, that councillors with personalities that could vote for other persons in other political parties. But when you see some councillors that were being put by barons of political party, know that they will cast their votes on such political parties. But I really cry for our opposition parties, because when you avoid municipal twin elections and you are only advocating, you keep avoiding elections, there is no way you can change the country. And in a democracy, you can only change through the ballot box. But we have seen situations where there is corruption in the ballot box. But looking at Prince Ekoso with his outing, Mr. Moderator, I think that those are young politicians in the country that I want to say they are like a nursery. Those are political parties that the USDP party is a nursery. But with Kamto's party, I feel that Professor Kamto has bared a name and he has that personality that he can pull the crowd. But Mr. Moderator, to a greater extent, when you look at parties like Cabral Libi is going in for the regional elections, and he was the third in the presidential election, and he has a number of councillors. That's why he's going in. And Cabral Libi, if you look at the history of his party, you will see that Cabral Libi links a bit with the CPDM political party, though it's an opposition party. But when you look at parties like the SDF, the USDP, Professor Maurice Kamto's party, the CRM, they have, even if there were peace, there was peace in the Northwest and Southwest, these political parties wouldn't create any effect in the development, in the devolution of power in the Northwest and Southwest. And I want to ask myself, when you look at the USDP, do they even have a college? Can they form a college? Okay. So their seats have no impact in these regional elections. But I feel that at this juncture, regional elections, if it were to run on the 6th of December, I will still be pressing on His Excellency President Paul Biya that we need to work on our electoral codes. We need to revise our constitution. Because if regional election runs in December 6th, Mr. Moderator, just know that most of the delegates that will be elected by these regional councillors, and most of these regional councillors, they will come from the ruling CPDM party. Because as for now, let me learn with your permission, as for now, the USDP is a nursery, it's a baby, still maturing. They have no seats, they have no councillors. But for Professor Maurice Kamto, he failed to partake in the twin election. So that's why if you see political parties like Professor Maurice Kamto's party, they are decrying is because they know that they don't have councillors. And also the SDF has few councillors. The SDF can't create an impact in this election. Most of the opposition
before
parties.
Before I come to you, SKQ4, let me come to you. He said, given that these parties don't have councillors, they can't have maybe representative in the regional house. How true can that be?
That is a fact, that they don't have.
But don't you think that with the democracy that is fast coming, people are becoming wiser? Yeah. They need the real people to be there.
Yeah, I'm coming to that. It's very true that Prince Ekoso's USDP party doesn't have councillors, especially in the Northwest and Southwest regions. It's very true that Maurice Kamto's CRM party doesn't have. It's very true that the SDF doesn't have. This might sound...
No, they have a few.
They have a few.
They have a few. SDF has a few.
They have a few. And this might sound as if they are boycotting elections because they do not have these councillors. Yeah, it might sound so, and somebody might really argue that this is the reason why they are boycotting elections. Very well. But the question is, do we have a malaise in the Northwest and Southwest regions? Yes, we do have a malaise. Has it contributed to some of these parties not having councillors? That is a fact. It has. The Northwest and Southwest regions are the stronghold of the SDF party. And when Dr. Busi says that even without the crisis, the CRM party wouldn't have created impact. I would love to disagree with Dr. Bosi. I'm not a fan of. I'm not a sympathizer of the CRM party.
No, you didn't get me where, sir. You didn't get me where. I said even without the crisis, because they don't have councillors.
That's what.
If they had councillors, they would have created that impact because
I'm coming, Dr.
It's a popular party at the moment.
I'm coming, Dr. Bosi.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm a civil society activist, and I'm non-partisan, but I observe things from an objective perspective. I simply believe that the reason why these parties have become weaker and weaker, it is because there is a political instability in the country that doesn't guarantee any credible electoral process. Any credible electoral process has been tampered with. And for us to have this election that reflects the true will of the people, speaking through the ballot, we need to resolve this political crisis and give the grassroots the opportunity to elect their representative. That is something that is not happening. And that is what pushed some of these. It is true that even without the crisis, our democracy was that very fragile, and that you couldn't really have those parties really dictating their law on a very mighty giant CPDM. It is very true. But the question is, has the crisis contributed to the downfall of some of these parties, especially the Northwest and Southwest region? That is a fact. And now, are they right to say, let us halt this whole masquerade of election and then we resolve our situation, our conflict before we go to election? I think it is very objective. I think it is morally right for these parties to come together and do what they're doing. The question is whether they're going to go to the end of.
As somebody said, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Achu, I followed his interview, which is most people are looking at it to be true.
Yes.
This election will take place in divisional headquarters,
yes.
and maybe there will be some serenity. It is not like a mass election. Don't you think that there's no reason for saying that there's insecurity?
There is insecurity because if you look at what happened in Libya during the senatorial election, the elections didn't basically take place in Libya. Senators were elected in the manual division. That is a fact that we have not been able to tell ourselves. That shows that there was insecurity. So it becomes difficult for you to defend that people are going to be voted on this basis. The truth is that there is insecurity in the Northwest and Southwest region. Even if it's one person who is going to vote, that person's life is in danger because the person will not 100% stand in public and say, I'm voting. Because there is a taboo on voting in the Northwest and Southwest region by people who claim to be in control of situations. So even when it is one person who is supposed to vote, that one person voting has to be very careful. He cannot 100% say, I am free to vote.
Okay, Mr. Moderator, please let me add one thing because, please, there's another 5 years, a 5 years mandate.
Yeah.
And when you look at this 5 years mandate, you look at parties like the CRM. If the CRM is avoiding such an election, it's because the CRM knows that if this election goes on for these 5 years, Cameroonians will suffer. That's another reason. They will suffer because, why would they suffer? They will suffer because they already know that the CPDM has majority of councillors. And when you look at all the other baby parties, they just want their voices to be heard because they don't have councillors. So we have to be serious. This, when we talk of regionalization, is a kind of giving power and authority and resources to the local people to develop. And the fact that they are avoiding the election, everybody is at the center of instability in the Northwest and Southwest. And when you look at the other regions of Cameroon, permit me, okay, we have about 7 regions in Cameroon that are stable, Mr. Moderator. Let's be fact about that. If elections were to be held in these 7 other regions, the CPDM will still take all the seats because the other parties and the other baby parties do not have councillors.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Let me come to SK Kufo. You know, the question now is, Prince Ekoso and his party has been very mute, very cool in the arena of politics. But this time it's like the Cameroon NSA movement has just made them to come up to become so responsible. What has really made you people in the party to be very quiet for a very long time, but this time you want to start making some noise?
Thank you very much, Mr. Yambo. I may be disappointed to believe that a journalist like you is not informed. I want to say that your information is so limited, which is not good for your profession.
Which is a reality, and all platforms say that. They have been very quiet. They don't care about anything that happens in the country, but they are very surprised this time. They came up with a letter that is not really defined.
Mr. Mambo, this may be your platform, but permit me talk.
Yeah.
What I want to say is that as a journalist, you are very limited with information.
No, we are not limited.
I'm coming.
You can't say that, because the party only came up and made some noise during elections, and they were not very effective on the field for campaigns and so on. After that, they went back to their laurels. It's only now that we are getting.
At least you're talking.
Yes,
now you have said something. It gives me
just say what you have to say.
It gives me that you have information, but believe to know that journalists are being piloted by other parties. You may want to tell me from that side. It's okay.
Just say what you have to say. Yes.
USDP has been very vibrant.
Yes. How?
We want to talk about it being vibrant. This is not the first time USDP is making its voice nationally or on things that concerns the nation. Mr. Mambo, I want to take you back. Was it 2011? The last presidential election.
Almost 10 years ago.
Almost 10 years back.
I want to cut the last presidential election before I'm not talking about 2018. The election for
2011.
If you may interest you, Ekoso was a candidate. I want you to get back on that fact checking. Ekoso was a candidate alongside Kawala and the others. And along the line, USDP decided to side along with Kawala because they believed that he had a better vision and a better representation at that moment. So I'm just trying to clear it so that you don't make that mistake someday to say, maybe this is the first time. I want to get you back.
There's not a mistake here.
I want to come you back, Mr. Moderator, that in 2018, USDP was a front bearer with the coalition with Al-Keremuna, which finally led to the coalition with CROM towards the presidential race.
And which the CRM made them to be known.
I am coming.
Yeah, okay.
Before they met CRM, you will not tell me that USDP was a strategic partner to Akeremuna's movement. The now movement in projecting him. One is the CAC, USDP was the spearheader for Akeremuna's campaign. Coming alongside CRM, I want to say that there are politicians that have different strategies and different formats. The USDP has always taken the stand. Not to forget to say USDP has not taken a stand. I want to even talk about Operation Survivor Cameroon that was initiated by CRM. It was still championed by the national president of USDP. So I will not be saying that you are short-sighted with information because these are data you should have in front of your table.
No. What we are saying here,
before you make a statement for a party, you are talking about an entity.
No, I'm just saying a reality. Okay, let me come to you, Mr. Solomon.
For an entity, so you should have enough information about the entity.
We are in a platform. You need to back yourself if an idea comes up.
I am coming.
Because at one platform they were even asking which party is that, who is the head of that party.
Those are baby parties.
We have this impression. Barrister is making us to have this impression that political parties exist during political campaigns.
Yes, they disappear.
Yeah, and then when there are no political
parties, they
disappear. No, Mr.
Those are baby parties.
Mr. Solomon,
Kamto that just came. Every mouth of a child knows.
Kamto is consistent.
We have to feel Prince Ekoso. We have to feel Prince Ekoso and the USDP party pronouncing themselves on critical issues.
Those are baby parties.
On critical and burning issues of the country. But the party has been lacking. This is where you feel that
who knows that party in the grassroots
concerned. Who knows about the well-being of Cameroonians, not just interested in election. When a political party comes up only during election season, then there is a problem. That is what we are talking about.
Thank you very much.
Go to Lebi go to all the
suburbs. 30 seconds.
Who knows USDP?
Let him learn. Yes.
Who knows USDP?
You have 30 seconds.
They need to be political parties have to be serious in this country.
Go on. Your mic is on.
I cannot talk in the midst of noise.
No, your mic is on.
Political parties
is not constructive.
Political parties have to be serious. Mr. Moderator, what we are saying is that when there's presidential elections and there are elections, you see small petty political parties come up and they want to run for original elections. And when election passes, they die. And what we are saying is that we need strong oppositions in this country that can be consistent.
What stops you from being an opposition?
Okay.
Mr. Mambo,
Talk about your party.
Mr. Mambo, before I come this, you have been hitting on it and you have been making them. Mr. Mambo, I want to say that I respect my co-panelists not a lot because they are gentlemen with high academic feathers.
Yes.
I want to believe that constructiveness should be one of the things that should be demonstrated on a panel talk. I want to see a talk should be delivered from one person to another and not a rampart rattling and shantling on the table. There's one thing, you post a question to me, whether the political party, I am telling you what we have been doing.
Yeah.
You have the right to see my political party from your point of view, you want to see it. You may see it as a grasshopper, you may see it as a cat, I may decide to see it as a lion. We have a different perspective depending on how I am piloting it. So it is your perspective, but when I am giving a point, let me give my point and you say, one thing I want to tell you about USDP is that USDP is strategic. When they were talking, I want to see that great points were being raised up, but I want to see that there's a lot of contradiction with what people who think they master things they don't master. First thing, Mr. Mambo, I want to let you know, like it's rightly put, Cameroon has been under a strain of tyranny, like our president, like we put it in our letter.
Yeah, I'm coming to that.
I'm coming. We want to talk about the tyranny sector, like what Professor Maurice Kamto is standing against today. It's not new to say the electoral code by itself has given a lot of limitations to make democracy itself become a transparent ability. When they want to talk about parties coming up during the electoral process and the worst, we want to say that all political parties in Cameroon, due to the political landscape and the suppressiveness of the CPDM, even the SDF, they come during elections and after they win, you only hear of their mayors. And at times, you don't even see the differences between their mayors and other mayors of different parties.
Okay, before I go to the other people, he talks of, or the letter talks of the tyranny of the government we have today. And now, if you look at it, the letter appreciates Kamto for fighting this, but we see very little of the USDP fighting it, but they come up to say it. Does it mean they know that it's a tyrannic regime, but they sit in their laurels? No,
USDP has been fighting. The simple truth is that if you people expect that we must go on the road to protest to show that we are fighting. No, we are not doing. We are doing it
by press conferences.
No, by Mr. Mwambo.
Yes.
After this program, maybe you have never devoted interest in USDP. Just go back on your session machine and you see that USDP has been having press conference time without number. Even here in the city of Boya, USDP have been having press conference. In Yaoundé, he has been having. You want to come to Douala, USDP has been having. USDP is one of the political parties that has struggled to really unify itself with other opposition parties, coming together with UPC and many others.
Let's look at the response of the other parties. Let's look at the response of the other parties. We've talked of the, as we call it, the totemism of the USDP. You don't know how they are very trickish in their letter and their way. Okay, now let's take the SDF. You know, Kamto has also brought the SDF into the, let me say, the limelight of talking during this period now. And the SDF, there was kind of chaos. You know, some people accepting to join Kamto, some people not accepting. Finally, the chairman came and said they are not part of it. They are not part of the elections. They are not part of them, which means that they align with what Kamto is saying, that no elections. Okay, now, if you look at the SDF, are they merely crying for their past glory that they lost?
The SDF, to my objective observation, has been that party that has been very inconsistent in their words.
They past glory, like in the 90s, they started maybe refusing going in for elections, and at one time, you know, people saying that they are correlating with CPDM and their actions in the field, on the field.
Well, election boycott is a very renowned tool in democracy.
Okay.
Yeah, when you boycott an election, it speaks volume. It speaks about the credibility of the elections, and it puts people to question. Both national and international observers begin to ask a lot of questions about the whole system. I think the SDF boycott of the 1992 election contributed a lot to the modification of the electoral code to where we, even though we still have a lot of work to do, but the boycott sounded a loud whistle to both the national and international community about the electoral system in Cameroon as a whole. My issue here is with the new SDF that we know the new SAF will say they are going to sharpen their matches, and the next minute the matches have not been sharpened.
Good.
And so
They are fluctuating.
yeah, they have this inconsistency in their approach. And so when the SDF says they wouldn't go in for regional election, for the purpose of the fact that they don't have enough councillors, you might begin to think that they will stand on their point. But
Mr. Artislum,
I doubt if I would have had that same view, if the SDF had enough councillors to go in for.
Yeah, all of you are talking of the number of councillors these parties have. Does it mean that they can't be changed, where Cameroonians will become wise to know that we need square peg on square holes, that we put the right people? It doesn't mean whether they have councillors or not.
Dr. Busi just made mention of the fact that we are a young democracy, and that's a very fact. Cameroon is a very fragile democracy, and Cameroon, especially the ruling party that controls the political terrain in Cameroon, they still operate on what they call party discipline. And so it becomes difficult for them to
But voting is private.
Yeah, voting is private, but the issue is that results will be out, and they will know that these people did not.
At this particular region.
Yeah, this particular region, they know that the CPDM is majority, what they call majority écrasante.
And the national cake.
Yeah.
Dr. Busi, if you look,
if it is difficult for people to really represent the true voice of democracy instead of representing the views of their party. And again, given that, I'm sorry I have to say this, the CPDM to me is not my ideal political party. The people who are in the CPDM, sometimes they're just using this party to protect their businesses. I'm sorry to say, but that's the way I view the CPDM. So I don't really see them as real politicians who care about the interests of the people. And so it's going to be difficult for me to think that they can vote objectively.
let's look at the CPP. Could it be that Madame Kawala has just been a prophetess in the past years up to now, given that he has been calling for opposition parties not to go for elections, that until the code is revised and so on? They never heard, but this time they are joining her.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. When there was time for them, most of these political parties not to even vying in for the presidential elections, you saw them, they went in. But before I answer your question, let me answer the question of what you asked there. What we need strong institutions. And the day we have strong institutions in this country that are independent, that's when we'll have people with personality and integrity. And when you start having persons with integrity, like go to America, you see the Republican and the Democrats. And many a times, you see they vote for persons of personality.
True democracy.
True democracy. That's what we are lacking in our young democracy, because it's still like a nursery. But because of party discipline, as he said, because people want to enjoy the national cake, they feel that development can only come into their divisions and subdivisions and regions when they vote the political party in power, which that is not the case. But when you look at local development and local elections, like the regional elections we are saying, power now is given to the people. The bias here is that it's a college system. And now that it's a college system, a single political party has majority. And when we say you are voting for delegates, at the end of the day, there might be persons who are even neutral, who don't have political parties, who have abilities and skills that can still be looked upon. But in our kind of democracy, it is very, very difficult. And one thing I hate with young democracies is that you will see many political parties who cannot create an impact. They cannot create an impact in Cameroon. We have more than 100 political parties.
Busi, after 60 years, Is it the democracy? Is it the people who are not aware, who are not informed, or it is the regime that is making things to be too hard?
It's a two.
Because when we say young democracy, I believe Cameroonians now are too aware to know what they need.
It's a two-sided thing. The thing is that, Mr. Moderator, when you look at the government in power, the government in power has all the resources, and they are trying to keep all the hegemony among themselves. They have the army, they have the finance, they have the resources. But in a democratic country, in a more advanced democracy, things don't work like that. They look at people with personalities. Look at Kawala, as you were saying. Madame Kawala is somebody that is a lady that I respect in this country. Mr. Moderator, whether you like it or not, this is a woman that when she says something, she does it. It's not like other baby political parties. When election comes, they come up and they disappear. When you look at the presidential elections to today, I think that Professor Maurice Kamto has been consistent. To be serious, he has been talking on a single thing: the changing of the electoral code. The changing of the electoral code. They should revise the electoral code and the solving of the Anglophone problem and so on. He has been consistent. To another extent, despite blaming the SDF has been standing on federation. But when the people wanted the SDF not to go in for the presidential election, they went in. But now that the people do not even care about them, they want to avoid regional elections, and they don't even have people to vote for them for regional elections. So we have to look at this thing on both sides, Mr. Moderator. It's not a one-sided
Before we go to, we'll be taking a bend to
But
this.
I want to say that the ruling party is so sensitive in that when they go, they allow people to create more political parties to confuse them.
Okay.
And these young political parties, I think that it's high time they just form a coalition with strong opposition.
Before we take a
parties.
bend to this topic, I want us to discuss a few generalities. But before we take those generalities, let us also look at the response of the CPDM through.
Please, let me also land by also saying that what Chairman Kamto is saying, Professor Chairman Kamto is saying, I feel that people need self-defense. We are suffering the dreadful crisis of COVID-19. We are suffering the Anglophone crisis, and let Professor Maurice Kamto not also bring
and the Anglophone crisis was there during the presidential and municipal elections.
The Anglophone crisis was there, but we don't want a nationwide riot in this country, please.
Okay. Now, let us take now the response of the CPDM through Minister Atanganji with his beehive threats. You know, if you look at the threat he has given, does it have any flow of water?
Definitely it does. Like when our national chairman, Prince Michael Ekoso, said the election is of no priority. The United Socialist Democratic Party actually meant it, that the election is of no priority. First and foremost, we want to say that the country has been taken, or is being governed like a personal business of some certain persons. So the election or no election is not really going to change anything. Why? Because there's a status quo that the CPDM is only looking at how to govern Cameroon, and that is the parameters of operation they have been using before and now. And they are simply just extending it to a different dimension by bringing the regional election, which has nothing to do with Cameroonians.
Mr. S.K. Kufa, the threat Mr. Tanganji is giving against Kamto, is there no legality, is there no legality of for demonstration?
There are legalities for demonstration, but let's look the way Professor Maurice Kamto is going about it. Professor Maurice Kamto is putting a threat against the nation. He says that we will stop election at the polling station. If I want to follow his word, he said we will stop election at the polling station. You're a journalist, we follow that up. You get me? He did not say we are going to carry a demonstration on the street against election. Because we want to say that it is a constitutional right for protest, or peaceful protest, to go like we saw the Douala people protesting for a Bamenda chief that was put in Douala. So it is a constitutional right.
But we're in a regime whereby protests, if they are not when they don't create a kind of effect, serious effect, the regime doesn't respond.
I don't want to get myself into that. I want to align back in the fair of your question or the legality of that. But we are seeing Professor Maurice Kamto telling the government that I am coming to disrupt election. Protesting and vehemently going to disrupt election where election has to be carried out are two different things. Because I can still protest and make my point known, carry my peaceful protest without me necessarily touching a polling station or a polling box. Like, we want to see that for us in USDP, we say it is of no priority. We think that what is of priority is for Cameroonians generally to look a way forward to solve the Anglophone crisis so that Cameroon can restore back in a state of peace and development. So we are looking at it from a reformatory point of view. So the election or no election, we want to see that same people, same faces, different positions.
Okay, before we welcome Mr. Njomosiri, let me come to you, Mr. Ate Solomon. Looking at the threat of Minister Atanganji, because everybody knows he's directing it to Maurice Kamto, Professor Maurice Kamto. Well, what's your take about such a threat of a beehive, which, because you know what's a beehive, which means he's really prepared with his military?
It is a sad situation for Cameroon.
Yeah.
It's a sad situation that the country is governed by threats.
Yeah.
When the people are governed by threats, the people are dead. The people cannot express themselves. And it is very dangerous for the democratic process and for the development of the country. Yes, the people have, it's a constitutional right for people to contest a situation through protest. It's a constitutional right enshrined by the Cameroon Constitution and even the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That's a constitutional right. It's a right for people to protest.
Yeah.
And so when people think that something is not going well and they feel like they should express their constitutional right by going down the streets, I'm not a proponent of violence. Because Professor Maurice Kamto hasn't said violent protest, he has said peaceful protest. I'm not a proponent of violence. Yeah. And when he says people should come out and protest against the system, that is not good for them. And instead of us...
And somebody who is so versed with the law...
Yes. I think Professor Maurice Kamto is one of the finest law professors that we have in Africa, not just in Cameroon, in Africa. And so when he speaks like that person who masters the constitution of the country, and somebody who has worked with the constitution of Cameroon and drafting the constitution of the present constitution of Cameroon. People have criticized him of drafting what he is kicking against today. And so when a professor of that caliber asks Cameroonians to demand what is rightfully theirs, I think that it is the interest of the Minister of Territorial Administration to use an appeasing language.
Okay, before Mr. Njomosiri concludes, don't you think that Professor Kamto, who has been in-house, he knows what has been happening there? He's merely preaching a message now that Cameroonians are not taking it serious. A Cameroonian can only regret when it's too late.
Yes, I think Professor Maurice Kamto knows exactly what he's doing. He knows the inside of the house, and he simply thinks that it is time for Cameroonians to clean the mess.
Okay.
We really fear for the future of this country. We fear, and we wouldn't wish for Cameroon what is happening in other countries. So we're really pleading that Minister Atanganji should show us a bit of social responsibility through his communication. There's supposed to be some kind of responsible communication coming from our authorities at this moment, because if we look at where the Anglophone crisis is today, the Anglophone crisis has escalated to where we are today because of the high horse language. Okay. And so for us to have a peaceful situation, for us to appease what can befall this nation, we need to go down from our high heels and start speaking appeasement. It is not time for warning. It is not time.
Before we start having other views, let us just have a jingle break. When we come back, then we'll get some other views from other people.